Hi, I wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about sleep and athletics. And the title sort of speaks for itself. Sleep makes champions, so it's time to take charge of your own. My name's Carrie Brown. I'm a professor in the Department of Occupational Therapy in the Faculty of Rehabilitation at the University of Alberta. I recorded this May 18th, and I hope you find it useful. The objectives of this presentation are to review some of the basic science of sleep. With that information, you'll be better able to understand things that you can do that are very practical, very easy to implement, and put you back in charge. It's important if you understand the basic science of sleep because it's linked to some very key needs that all athletes have, things like the need for balance and for stamina, for good judgment, for strength, and also the ability for your body to heal. The presentation will also teach you some very simple changes to your environment and how those can significantly improve the quality of your sleep and reduce the need for any kind of sleep promoting medication. So who cares? Well, you hear all the time people saying, "Oh, sleep is for sucks," or "I'll sleep when I'm dead." And I mean, there's a lot of myths out there. But actually, getting a good night's sleep is not for wimps. It takes practice and perseverance. But once you get the habit down, you are set to go. Take a look at some of these. These are just a very small sample of the athletes who say, no, we really need to have a decent night's sleep or else I'm not able to perform. So people like Kevin Durant, an NBA basketball player, Tom Brady, Super Bowl, Lauren Fisher, CrossFit. I mean, these people, I think they know what they're talking about. And they're role models for many other things having to do with athletics. So let's pay attention to what they have to say about sleep as well. So, what do we know from the science about sleep and its effect on performance? Well, we know that insufficient sleep will affect the amount of cortisol and serotonin production in our bodies. It will send things out of regulation so that you won't have enough of these when you need them or too much at the wrong time. It can affect our growth. It certainly affects people's appetite, the ability to turn it on and off. A lot of these sleep deficiency is very much related to hormonal dysregulation. And so a lot of these functions of your body are regulated by hormones, right? So we need to do whatever we can to promote our bodies to do the work that it needs to do. There's a very clear link in the evidence between obesity and diabetes and sleep deficiency. And that relates back to that our body's inability to turn our appetite off. Your immune system becomes affected when you're sleep deprived. You're not as resistant to colds and flus and those sorts of things. People have a heightened risk of cardiovascular disease, and tissue healing is delayed. We know that very clearly. When people are sleep deficient, their bodies don't heal as quickly. All kinds of functional activities are interfered with, just your overall general feeling of being able to do things. People's concentration and their new learning, their ability to have insight into things that might be risky or how to do things more efficiently or safer. That's all affected. Certainly, people's mental health is affected, anxiety, depression. We know those things are all related to sleep deficiency. So I could go on and on about this list, but basically, I think you just need to take it as fact that when people are sleep deprived, they are not going to be able to perform as well. So why would you do that to yourself? If you're very much interested in an athletic career and it's all about performance, then you want to do whatever you can to help yourself perform as well as possible. A little bit of very basic physiology here just to get you started. Most people don't know that sleep occurs in stages. It used to be considered to occur in 5 stages, but now we have it's been sort of collapsed down and we talk about 4 stages. So that's why the chart looks a little bit funny. The first stage of sleep, very light. A lot of you might do that after a meal or in the middle of the afternoon and your head sort of bobs up and down. You go, oh, right, I'm awake again. Don't worry, I haven't really fallen asleep. Very light sleep, our muscle activity starts to slow down a little bit, but you're not deeply asleep. Then the second part of the sleep stage is where our breathing starts to slow down, our heart rate starts to slow down, our actual brainwave activity. You can record changes. There's a slight decrease in the body temperature, so your core body temperature drops. And that's important to keep in mind, and I'll explain more about that later. Then we have stage three, and this is where deep sleep starts. The brain starts to generate delta waves. People in stage three sleep, it's very deep and they don't wake up very easily. Breathing is very relaxed. There's not a lot of muscle movement. Like I said before, there's a lot of delta wave activity. So this is a period of time when you are deeply asleep, and to wake most people out of stage three sleep, you need to shake them hard or have a really strong alarm clock. Then the final stage is REM sleep. And then we've all likely heard about REM, rapid eye movement sleep. This is where brainwave activity changes. It starts to speed up. People remember more of the dreams that they have during REM sleep, and muscles are quite relaxed to the point where it's actually very hard for people to move. Um, their heart rate increases, their breathing increases, so they're more alert in a certain way. Now, what's interesting is that at different points of the sleep cycle, different things are happening. So, in that stage three, very deep sleep, that's where a lot of physiological things are happening. Your body is healing and metabolizing, and toxins are being flushed out of your system, and like you're doing all that good stuff for yourself, and you need that, right? If you don't um, take care of that physical well-being, you're going to be in a lot of trouble and not able to function very well the next day. But the other stage that's very important too is the rapid eye movement stage. And the research seems to indicate that this is when learning occurs. So if we want to learn something, we need to allow our bodies to get into that stage of sleep. Learning, memory, insight, a lot of emotional processing. So, the two stages are both important, but for different reasons. And what's very interesting is that this occurs in a cycle over the course of the night. Each cycle takes about, give or take, about 90 minutes. And then we have multiple cycles during the course of one night. So what's another interesting feature about that is that the amount of time you spend in each of the stages actually changes over the course of the night. So if you look at this graph here, when you first fall asleep, you don't spend a whole lot of time in deep sleep or in REM sleep. It's more stage one, stage two. You're getting there, but you're not deeply asleep yet, and very little time in REM. And it's not until about 5 hours into sleep, so after you've gone through about 4 sleep cycles, that the periods of REM start to be longer. So the question I pose on this slide, what is the problem with only 4 or 5 hours of sleep? Well, the answer is pretty clear when you look at how our bodies work. We may get enough sleep to help us feel that physically we can manage, but we're not getting enough REM sleep. If you only get 5 hours of sleep, you're missing significant chunks of REM, and that's when learning and insight and emotional regulation and all those other important things happen. So it's not just some old wives' tale that you need to get, 7 to 8 to 9 hours of sleep a night. There actually is a physiological reason in your body for that. This next slide is again a little bit more of the neurophysiology, because once you understand this, you'll be able to do a lot of problem solving for yourself. You're all smart people. Once you know some of the science, you can figure it out. So our sleep is regulated basically by two mechanisms. One is homeostasis. That has to do with chemicals that are produced in our body that help us respond to activity or be more prepared for sleep. So, an example would be something like adenosine, which increases in response to activity and builds up in your system, but then it gets to a certain point and then you start to feel sleepy. Cortisol is another example. It's released by the brain early in the morning. It helps you wake up. It alerts you, right? We know cortisol is a bit of a stress hormone, but you don't want it there all the time, right? Melatonin is another hormone that your body produces, and it does it in response to dusk. So if you dim the lights at night, that helps you feel sleepy. But if you sit in a dim room all day long during the day, that's going to make you feel sleepy all day long because you're sending your body a message to produce melatonin. So we can tamper with this system, right, by adjusting the light and some other environmental factors, and we don't want to do that. But sometimes we don't understand what we're doing to ourselves. The second mechanism is what's called circadian rhythm, like your sleep cycle. And here's the test. If you ever have a sleep test and people say, where are all these things regulated? You're always pretty safe to guess hypothalamus. Okay? The hypothalamus regulates a lot in our bodies, and it of course is vulnerable. It's not a huge area, so we need to do things to help it be as maximally effective as possible. So we have these two different mechanisms that are going on. They're related, but they're not identical. We can send mixed messages and set up this tug of war system. We can, it's like a train wreck sometimes. People who are in dim rooms all day long, like in a classroom setting where you've got the lights turned down so you can see the PowerPoints. And then at night you go home and you flood yourself with blue spectrum light, gaming or using your laptop or looking at a giant screen TV. All of those sorts of things emit blue spectrum light, which tells your body, oh, it's daytime, stay alert. Don't make melatonin. Okay. So there are ways we inadvertently manipulate our bodies that are not healthy for us. Let's talk a little bit more about the sleep in the environment. I like to call this the low-hanging fruit. If we look after the environment that we're trying to sleep in, a lot of it um, can sort itself out. We don't have to use other types of interventions, or at least we don't need to use them as much. So here's some rules of thumb for you. Light, anything over 30 lux. Now, I put on the slide here, get out your smartphone apps. You can download light meters and decibel monitors for 99 cents, or some of them are free, right, off for your smartphone. So check it out for yourself. Light, you want to have under 30 lux, because anything over 30 lux tells your body, turn off the melatonin, be alert, be ready to go. So on the flip side of that is we need to have lots of daylight exposure to keep us alert, because otherwise we're going to feel lethargic and loggy and not performing very well. So lots of light in the daytime, very little light at night. It takes your body about 90 minutes to start to produce sufficient melatonin to go to sleep. So you need to start dimming things down, about an hour and a half before you're ready to go to bed. Sound is the other environmental factor we can look at. And again, you can measure this with a sound meter on your smartphone. Anything over 30 decibels, about 30, 35 decibels, triggers our bodies to start alerting. So our bodies will start to produce hormones and neurochemicals that wake us up and keep us alert. So again, not a good situation when you're trying to sleep at night. Temperature. Remember I said before your core body temperature needs to drop a little bit for your body to go to sleep. So we can manipulate the temperature of the rooms that we're in, but if we try to sleep in an environment that's too warm, we're not going to be able to sleep very well. The ideal bedroom temperature is somewhere between 18 and 22 degrees Celsius. And the other thing you need to keep in mind with that is that the bedding that you have also, and your pajamas and stuff like that, also create a little bit of a microclimate. So you might have to experiment a little bit to get the right temperature for your body to be able to fall asleep, but then to have flexibility to pull some extra covers on, because early in the morning, about 3 o'clock in the morning, our bodies start to warm up and then you'll start to feel chilly. So what else? Well, there's a lot of sleep risks in sports. Athletes are more vulnerable than a lot of other people to sleep problems. So if you experience sleep problems, you shouldn't feel that there's something wrong with you. It's something that happens to a lot of people. But we just need more information so that, you need more information so that you can do something about it. Some of the things that make you more vulnerable is the schedules and all the travel. That doesn't help people. Concussion, we know very clearly that concussion is related to sleep problems, and people with sleep problems are actually more at risk of concussion, because when you have chronic sleep problems, you're not making good judgments, your insight is impaired, you're more likely to put yourself at risk. Pain, pain and sleep are like tied together. They're like, you know, um, I don't know, mutt and Jeff or chalk and cheese or whatever the two things, salt and pepper, there, that's a better analogy to use. They go together because when people have more pain, they are less likely to sleep. But now we also know that when people have sleep problems, their body actually is more sensitive to pain. So we might not be able to do something about the pain all the time, but we can always do something about the sleep. Okay, so you want to focus on that as well. Anxiety and stress are very high for athletes. There's a lot riding on many of the competitions and the activities that you're involved in. And that again interferes with sleep. It produces stress hormones. It makes it hard for us to turn off and get a good night's sleep. You have competing time demands. And usually, what ends up happening when someone is trying to juggle sports and a social life and maybe a job and some friends and going to school and everything else, it's sleep that ends up suffering. But actually, that's one of the last things that you should be trying to cut out because it makes you that much less effective with everything else. And I put this in, I thought, oh, I certainly hope none of you ever have a nose that looks like this, poor guys. But breathing actually is important, and obstructed breathing can very much interfere with sleep. So if anyone ever tells you, oh, you snore, or you wake up in the mornings and you feel very stuffed up, take that seriously. Get it checked out because sleep apnea is no joke, and people need to be able to get proper oxygen into their bodies or else they're not going to sleep properly. They're going to have elevated heart rates. It's not a good situation. So, don't just pass this stuff off. And then the last thing that's on my list here, and there are certain other things, but the other thing is about the training environment, right? Um, Sometimes you are going to camps or you're doing, like you're having to train late at night or very, very early in the morning. And we know those are all things that are barriers to sleep. So the idea is not to give up your training, but to figure out, well, what can I do realistically, what can I do in the areas that I do control so that whatever sleep I do get will be the best I can possibly get? All right. I live in the real world just like the rest of you, and I'm not here to tell you, oh, you must give everything up and make sure that you get those 9 hours a night. Right. That's our ideal. And there are ways we can get closer to it, but don't don't get don't get overwhelmed and don't give up because there's always something you can do. Even that extra 5 or 10 minutes can make a difference. So, I've already talked a little bit about why sleep matters to athletic performance. I wanted to offer you a little bit more of the evidence about that because sometimes it's not just yourself you have to convince. You've got other people who say, oh, don't worry about it, it'll be fine, suck it up, get on with it, all the wonderful free advice that none of us need. There's a lovely review that was done by Watson and his colleagues. It was published in Sports Medicine last year, actually, just fairly recently. And what they found, this very large study, they did a review of a number of different pieces of research, but what they found was that athletes generally have poor insight because of sleep deficiency. Okay, so if you're sleep deprived, you're not going to have very good judgment. You're not going to make very good decisions. The other thing they found that's quite interesting is that a lot of athletes say, well, no, there's no problem at all. I don't sleep, but it's okay. I'm fine. Well, that likely comes to that lack of awareness and lack of judgment, right? Because when you're most vulnerable is the time you're less likely to realize you have a problem. They also found that athletes tend to self-medicate. They use things like caffeine to wake themselves up in the morning and alcohol to sedate themselves at night so that they get to sleep. Now, people think they're helping themselves when they do that, and they have good intentions, but actually, those are two of the worst things you can do. Caffeine dehydrates you, and alcohol sedates you, so you don't really get a good sleep. It's not to help you sleep, it's to knock you out, and then your body has to process all of that toxin. So, those are not good strategies to use. They also, revealed that athletes have very minimal control over many of the elements that impact their sleep. So things like travel and schedules and um, certain anxieties and stuff. There's not a lot of control they have over it. So my takeaway message from that is whenever we can add control back into your lives, control over your sleep, that's what we need to be focusing on. And then the last thing that they flagged in their review is that athletes actually need more sleep than the average non-athlete. And that just makes sense, right? Because you're using your bodies hard. There's a lot more to process. You need to be constantly at your top performance, both physically and mentally. So sleep is very, very important. And also, you're more prone to injuries and concussions and those sorts of things that again interfere with sleep and set up a vicious cycle. Okay, so I call these the environment, to me, this is the low-hanging fruit. These are things that most of us can do something about. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It's not a big ask. You can just attend to it. And then these little things may add up enough to help you through a period of time when sleep is challenging for you. So the basics have to do with light, temperature, and sound. Light, you want to make sure it's as dark as possible at night and you get as much as you can in the daytime. So make sure at night you're getting under 30 lux, and that might mean wearing a sleep mask, doing whatever you have to do to the blinds in your bedroom. Once you get that light measure on your smartphone, actually 30 lux has to be pretty dim. Okay, so check it out, see how dim you have to go, and a lot of people do end up going to using a sleep mask. Then temperature, core temperature, I already talked about that, needs to drop. So you want between 18 and 22 degrees Celsius, but bedding that you can easily pull on. As the night goes on, you're going to need to put more bedding on top. And then sound, right? Above 35 decibels starts to wake us up, starts to trigger stress hormones to be released. So running white noise machines in the background, wearing good quality earplugs, whatever you can do to minimize the noise will all be to your benefit. And then this one, I just have to share this with you because this is also very important. The yuck gross factor, right? And it has to do with breathing. I talked before about, what happens when you have a broken nose, but this is about what happens when you don't wash your bedding very frequently. Our bodies, we all know this, your body sheds skin cells, and dust mites love to eat those dead skin cells. And then they poop, and they poop, and they poop, and they poop. And that's actually quite a significant allergen. Sorry, it sounded like I was getting all excited about dust mite poop there for a minute, but truly, it's it's a big problem for some people. And the best way, the only way really to deal with it is to wash your sheets. So you wash your bedding once a week, and things like pillows and duvets and things like that that are hard to wash, you don't actually have to put them through a full wet wash cycle. You can put them in a dryer on medium heat. Don't wash them, just take them, put them in the dryer on medium heat for about half an hour, and the heat and the movement shakes out the dust mite excrement and kills off, some of the allergens that are in there. So those are simple things to do. If you think about sleep like a system, right? So your sleep system is composed of lots of biological forces, like I was just talking about, and also social forces. Your friends who don't want you to sleep, they want you to go out and they want you to party and they want you to have coffee with them and all those other things. And then there's our values and beliefs, and that's up to you, right? You pick your priorities. You decide what is significant to you, and if one of your values is um, peak performance as an athlete, then this is something you're going to have to pay attention to. There are environmental forces, that's what I've been talking a lot about. And then, of course, there's all the behaviors and the feedback. So if you get a bad night's sleep, then you're going to worry, in the morning, you might not perform very well. And then you'll worry about that. And that worry is going to interfere with your ability to sleep. And then you can see how this feedback loop starts to get set up. So we want to avoid that, right? And for some people, that means things like learning meditation techniques or something that helps their mind calm at the end of the night. So what do you do? Well, you need to educate yourself and you need to educate the people around you because people will be trying to lure you back into all those bad habits. Then once you know what affects your sleep, then you can problem solve, right? You're smart people. You can figure out, oh, should I wear an eye mask or should I get new blinds or how can I manage this? You want to pay attention to your environment so you can evaluate it. I'm going to give you some links at the end so you can actually walk through your own sleep environment to change things. And it's like anything else, right? Practice makes perfect. So you want to try new techniques, you want to persevere. And over time, new habits get set up and you see the reward, and then it makes things very worthwhile. I just wanted to add this little bit about caffeine because most of us don't know much about caffeine. Health Canada did a study a few years ago to raise awareness, and they talked about the potential adverse effects of caffeine because a lot of us, we certainly like our coffee. They talk about over a certain level, it has a toxic effect, right? So it can cause muscle tremors, nausea, irritability. Well, if you already are upset and worried about a competition, caffeine is likely not the best thing for you to be ingesting. It has an effect on your cardiovascular system. If you are training to keep your heart rate low, the last thing you want to be doing is drinking caffeine to raise your blood pressure, raise your heart rate. Those are, counterintuitive to do those things. And if you think it's helping you wake up from a bad night's sleep, well, maybe that's not the best solution. It has an effect on our bone health and our ability to absorb calcium. Well, that's a big deal, right? When you're an athlete, you need to have healthy bones. It can have behavioral effects, causing anxiety, contributing to anxiety and jitteriness and inability to attend. Also, excessive and prolonged caffeine intake has been linked to the potential to increase your risk for certain types of cancers. And it also has an effect on people's ability to reproduce, so fertility and even a child's birth rate, weight, sorry. And then so people say, well, how much can I drink then? What is okay? And Health Canada recommends no more than 400 milligrams per day, and then for children under 12, about 40 milligrams a day should be the maximum amount. And I just throw this. This is one of the charts that they produced, and it breaks down energy drinks against. And I'm not picking on Starbucks here. It was just the coffee brand that they use in this chart. Now, one of the things you have to keep in mind is that caffeine can be supplemented into products, and there is no legal requirement that a manufacturer discloses how many milligrams of caffeine they have added to any product. So you may actually be overdosing yourself on caffeine and not realize it because of the product choices that you're making. Okay, so here's where you can get some more information about sleep. The Canadian Sleep Society, that's, well, Canadian obviously, the National Sleep Foundation, it's out of the US. Um, this website, Sleep Environment, it's not rocket science, all kinds of really useful short little video clips about changing your environment, particularly targeted at college and university students. So that's your group there. The BBC Science website, this is great. It's got lots of games you can try to test your reaction time and to understand more about how sleep affects reactions. Big deal. And new memory, there's all kinds of fun things there. So it helps sometimes when you're trying to explain to other people too. And then this link to a sleep diary. Sometimes when you're worrying about your sleep, a good thing is to start to keep a diary. What nights went well, what ones didn't, and then over time you see a pattern that starts to emerge. Then if you're going to go and seek some help for it, you take your diary along to show the healthcare provider. Now, this one, right, I just say, well, in your dreams. This is the common information that we get, no electronics 60 minutes before bed, because it shuts down melatonin. Now, that's the ideal, and I really wish everybody could do that. But I, you know, I'm just being realistic here. I know some people cannot do that, and there's no point in feeling guilty. You need to figure out how can you minimize the damage that you're doing. And one way to minimize damage is first to take a look at how much lux some of your devices are actually emitting. Because what's interesting is that different laptops and different desktops and electronic devices emit different amounts of lux. Right? So if you look at this table here, the MacBook Pro compared to a IBM ThinkPad, that's hugely different. So if you're going to go out and buy something new, you might want to just take a look at how much lux is it going to emit, right? Because that will help protect you a little bit more. I'm going to show you some other resources as well that you can use to help reduce that risk. But just to recap, right? Light less than 30 lux at night, sound less than 30 decibels. I've rounded these down like 30, 30. It's easy to remember. Temperature between 18 to 22 Celsius. Avoid synthetic bedding because those dust mites and allergens cling to synthetics more than to natural fibers. Make sure you get them in the laundry and at least into the dryer. Remember those dust mites, they're not nice. This is a manual you can download, The Children's Best Bedroom Environments for Sleep. Now, it was written for kids, but it doesn't really matter. The principles are the same. And it walks you through evaluating your own bedroom to see where the risks are and gives you suggestions for how you can fix that. So here's what I was going to finish off with, some interventions. So in the daytime, really, you do need lots of bright light. And if you can't get outside, maybe you need something like these set of goggles. They're called retimers, and they provide you with sufficient blue spectrum light exposure to keep your body alert during the daytime. You usually have to wear them for about 20 minutes twice a day. So 20 minutes for breakfast, 20 minutes at lunch will do it for most people. Or using light boxes similar to a seasonal affective disorder light box. It's the same principle, twice a day, 20 minutes. You decrease the light at night. So for some people, they use things like the Twilight app that you can download for your smartphone. There's a wonderful computer app called f.lux, and it automatically comes on and just starts to dim your screen. You'll see that in the bottom corner, the bottom right-hand corner of the screen here. Using things like, take a look at the clock radio if you have one in your bedroom. Make sure that it's not emitting blue light, that instead it's emitting red light, because blue light is the culprit here. You want to look at your social environment. And the other thing that can help reduce the amount of light exposure you get are things like goggles. Um, the people in the picture here, they've both got blue spectrum light filtering goggles, but make sure you go to a reputable source, right? Don't just buy something off of Amazon because it looks dead trendy. You want to make sure that you've got something that actually is doing what it's supposed to do. You'd pop these on about an hour and a half before bed. They don't interfere with your ability to read. They just filter out the blue light and allow your body to make the melatonin it needs so you can go to sleep. The two links that I put down here are both to companies that are university affiliates. And so the researchers actually there's research behind the glasses that they have put on the market. So I feel fairly comfortable saying those. There's other ones out there, but these are two that I know are good quality. And here's the last little thing. We don't have time to look at this during this presentation, but you should click on it for yourself and take a look. This is, people say, sleep, yeah, how important could it really be? But this is a little video clip they did with the Vancouver Canucks a few years ago about how they use sleep science to improve the team's performance overall. Because you think about it, right? The Canucks have got a lot of travel time, a lot of time zone changes, so their sleep is very much affected. And it's a really powerful clip, and so I hope you take a look at it. So remember, it's not rocket science. Little steps can all add up. There's resources out there. Take a look at that one I gave you before about sleep environments, and some of the other resources that I've already talked to you about. And I think that's all we're going to say today. There's all kinds of references here if you needed more information for some reason, but really don't feel discouraged. Little things do add up. Of course, none of us can do the ideal all the time. You just want to do the best you can, right? That's the important thing. Oh, look at all these references. Boy, if you even tried to read through these, that would be a good thing to put you to sleep right there. Anyway, thanks a lot for your time. I really appreciate it. And all the best with your coming events.